to show you how to use a rubric to really complete any assignment. In this case, I'm going to use it with a CER because that's your first assignment where we have a rubric, but you can use this idea with any assignment and rubric you get. I'm going to move over here to the Going Further CER or conclusion rubric. I'm using the Going Further one. Again, this works with any of them, and so feel free if you're doing mainstream. It's going to be a little different as far as what the rubric is telling you, but think of this more as a skill I'm teaching you than something specific with this rubric here. So a lot of students think that the purpose of rubrics is for the teacher to grade them at the end, and certainly that's one of the ways I use it. But I put it into your OneNote so that you have it because it's also essentially a checklist of what you need to do well on this assignment. So I'm going to be using this data here. Data is how canopy cover, so how covered an area is with tree leaves, like trees, that's the canopy, affects population diversity. Population diversity means how many different species, and in this case, this person was looking at species of plant life, is in a certain area. So when they're saying species of plant life, they mean like if it's all grass, that's actually just one species. But if there's grass and a fern, that's two different species. So it's not how many individuals, it's how many different types are grown. You don't really need to know a lot about that in order to understand how I'm using this rubric. But you can see they had three different conditions: open field, partial canopy, and full canopy. And then these were their averages. In the open field, there was an average of 5.2 different species per square meter. In the partial canopy, there's an average of 3.8 species per square meter. And then in the full canopy, there was an average of 2.4 species per square meter. So if I'm wanting to write a conclusion for this data, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look, and this is claim or answer. And on my L4, it says claim responds directly, clearly, and correctly to the question. Claim makes sense even without the question. So it was, how does the amount of canopy cover affect population diversity? So if I'm responding clearly to that question, looking at the data, I can see in the open field, there is the greatest population diversity compared to partial canopy and full canopy. I added in a question here just so you can, just to help, just so you have that there. I also realized I didn't add in units here, so I added that as well, species per square meter. But again, if I want to answer this question clearly and directly in a way that I don't even need the question, I would say that the open field had the greatest species diversity compared to partial canopy and full canopy. So now I have that sentence written down. So now I'm going to go back to my rubric and I see the next thing it says, right? So we've just done this, and I can highlight it or something like that to help me keep track of what I've done. But now the next thing it says is if there were a hypothesis, that there's a statement of whether the hypothesis was supported or not. Now, obviously, again, we just have some data here. We don't know if there was a hypothesis, but let's say that the person had hypothesized that the partial canopy would have the greatest diversity for whatever reason. Okay, well, that's not what the data supports. Now, we're not going to say that the hypothesis was wrong because we only have data from one trial. Maybe this is unique to this habitat that we are in, but we are going to say that the hypothesis was not supported by the data. I've got that statement. And I can actually, if I'm a pretty skilled writer, I can even say, combine this into one sentence. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly the way I'm showing you, but you could say the open canopy had the greatest diversity, the greatest species diversity compared to partial canopy and full canopy, which does not support the hypothesis, period. And so you can make that all one sentence. So now I go back here and I'm going to highlight that because I've done that. So now I see the next thing is the evidence, and it says data is relevant to the question, is reported as averages, and includes the full range of conditions. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to look at my averages. So I know I want to report the averages. And then when it says here, it includes the full range of conditions. What that means is I want to give data for where it was the greatest species diversity, but I also want to give the full range. The full range, the lowest was the full canopy. So I want to say something about how the open field had an average species density of 5.2 species per square meter compared to the full canopy that had a species diversity of 2.4 species per square meter. Now, I can certainly also include the 3.8 in the middle. That's totally fine. I don't have to, however, as long as I have that full range covered. So now I have both of these written, and I'm covering the full range. I use the averages. Let's see what else it says. It's relevant to the question. The question was, how does canopy cover affect population diversity? I'm talking about species diversity. I'm talking about canopy cover. So I've covered all of that. So I can now say, yes, I've done that. I could go on and finish the whole rubric and finish the whole CER. I don't think you need that because the purpose of this video was really to show you how you would use a rubric as directions. So obviously I would go through and I would do the same thing with the quantitative and qualitative reasoning. And then I would do the same thing with the discussion of error. As I said, I don't need to do all of that in order for you to understand how to use the rubric. But obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in class. Have a good day.